Okay, thank you for joining us here on the Grow Food Not Grass Summit. My name is Jason Brunson. I'm the founder of Rebel Gardens, and I'm your host here at Grow Food Not Grass. And with me today is Rebecca Hoffler. And Rebecca, can you let us know who you are?
Hi, Jason. Thank you for having me today. My name is Rebecca Hoffler. I am the program coordinator at Duke University. I work in sustainability, education, outreach, and communications. I'm historically a sustainability educator and an avid gardener, so I'm happy we were able to connect on that and today hopefully talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much. So as a sustainability coordinator at Duke, what do you do there? What are you teaching the Duke community about sustainability?
Yeah, so a lot of my focus is on what Duke is doing to combat its own emissions on campus. So we focus a lot about our carbon neutrality goal by 2024. And what that does is it gives me the opportunity to speak with all different audiences from all over campus. So I talk to students, faculty, staff, and then most importantly, I'm able to actually talk with the Durham community as well. So Duke has this unique relationship where Duke employees are Durham citizens and Durham citizens are Duke employees. So we're really one and the same. And I'm able to talk about everything from systematic paradigm changes about sustainability to very, very local, down to earth, one step at a time changes that you can make in your own life to help add to a larger impact to decrease our impact on the environment.
That is really cool. And that's perfect for what we're doing. I know one of the things that you discuss and all that is the notion of kind of the 21st century victory garden. I think you have a presentation here, and I'd love to kind of hear why you think victory gardens are still important here in the 21st century.
Yes, how the people have so much power to be producers of their own goods. And I think that's what we're going to be talking a lot about today. So we can definitely go into the presentation and talk about the role that victory gardens have in our present day life here in the year of 2020, rather than thinking about them as something that existed in the 1920s or in the 1940s, and how they can help improve our quality of life while creating some good systematic changes to the systems that our lives depend on.
Okay, well, let's get your presentation rolling, and I'm personally super excited to hear all about it. Let's do that. Okay, I think it looks like we are up, so I'm going to let you take it from here, Rebecca.
Awesome. So I am here to talk a bit about victory gardens and the power of people. So I work at Duke University, and education has always been a huge part of my life, and it's something that I love, and it's something that I'd really like to share with you today. So when we talk about sustainability, I think traditionally people immediately jump to the 1970s definition of environment, right? So when we educate on sustainability, we really talk about the intersectionality between people, planet, and profit. I think those 3 Ps are something that stand out a lot to people. A lot of corporations and businesses use that platform. Traditionally, the definition is meeting the needs of the present users without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So when we talk about future generations, we're really talking about our families. We're talking about the little children that we have in our lives, the little brothers and sisters, and everyone who's really important to keep in mind for future access to resources. And talking about access, when we talk about the equity of accessing these resources, the inequity of access to infrastructure and other resources, these are things that play a key role in determining the health of a population. Population health is a huge field. It's a science and community-based field that we're seeing a lot more of the reality in the COVID world and how we're living. So we can see that when you don't have access to transportation, or especially public transit, you do not have access to places that you need to go. Things like the grocery store, the doctor's office, the CVS to pick up your prescription. Lack in equitable education, nutritious food, and that's something we're going to really focus on today. Especially things like employment opportunities and access to public and safe spaces. Traditionally, we know that there's an undue burden on lower income and underrepresented minority communities. who have a higher level of exposure to things like pollutants from industry, right? So if you can remember NIMBY, not in my backyard, I think that's something that comes up, we all remember that. That is a very much a white privilege thing. It's a thing that exists because for generations, we've been able to build generational wealth. So we've had a lot of education, a lot of opportunity to become educated on issues, a lot of things like disposable time and disposable money to advocate against industries coming into our communities and polluting our air. So what we see is that they disproportionately end up in lower income communities who don't have the time or the educational resources to fight against this. Something again, food deserts. Food deserts are, we can actually go to the next slide. They're defined as geographic areas where residents do not have access to affordable, healthy food options, especially things like fruits and vegetables. So their access to this resource is restricted or non-existent. This is due to the absence of grocery stores within a convenient traveling distance. So this is important because when we talked about access to other resources, we talked about access to transportation. So either personal transportation or public transportation. We talked about the ability to go to a safe public place. So somewhere that has safe, reliable food options, somewhere that's affordable for people to buy safe food. When we traditionally think about lower income communities, I think bodegas and corner shops pop into mind, right? We don't really see a fresh farmer's market on every corner or a grocery that's selling a lot of fresh produce. So when we think about these communities and the food that they're eating and how it affects their daily lives, ask yourself this question. When you eat bad food, how do you feel? Usually you feel kind of bad. So imagine starting your day off like that. Imagine sending your children to school, eating a bad meal, and they have to perform at a lower rate because they don't feel as good. They're not as empowered nutritionally to perform at their best level. About 23 million people in America live in a food desert. You know, this is not an issue that we are exporting to other countries or something that's not happening in our communities. This is happening here and now. So when we talk about what does a food desert look like, we have to really keep in mind the fact that food deserts affect Americans and that we as citizens and neighbors have the ability to combat that problem. With COVID-19, I think a lot of people are being far more vigilant and realizing their exposure to sustainable food systems. So when this title, Food Supply Anxiety Brings Back Victory Gardens, this is from the New York Times. This is an article dated only a couple weeks ago in 2020. So we are seeing a lot of communities become very, very fearful that they are not going to be able to go to the grocery store and buy food that is either fresh or processed or anything. It's really this unique perspective that we have as Americans for the first time, especially in this generation, to not feel resource secure. I don't think ever growing up we felt that we weren't secure in the amount of resources that we have. And the fact that now we may be seeing interrupted transportation systems, interrupted fuel systems that do not allow us to get food from the farm to the grocery store is something we're all going to have to acknowledge. So when we talk about what the solutions are, you know, there are many solutions to this problem. Back in the day, especially in World War I, so the United States School Army existed. I don't know how many people would be thrilled to hear that the United States has a school for gardening and that we're able to organize through the federal government and the Bureau of Education with funding from the War Department to nationalize a curriculum around gardening and producing your own food. And so when this program hit in World War I, by Armistice Day, several million children had answered the nation's call to service. They were enlisted as soldiers of soil. So when we talk about what you can do in a world where you feel like you can't do anything, you can use the land you have to grow the food you need. There is such power in having the ability to produce your own food. Personally, this is my garden in New Jersey back after college when we started growing our own food. And I had never gardened in my life. The first time I took a watermelon out from that garden, I hacked it in half and I held it half in each hand, and I was nothing short of blown away, completely, absolutely blown away that I produced a watermelon in my backyard. And I ran around my house like a total nut, showing my entire family, this is a watermelon. And they're like, we know it's a watermelon. And I said, no, 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 this is a watermelon from our backyard. This is a watermelon that I produced and grew for you and that we got to share. So there's definitely not only something empowering about growing nutritious food for yourself and your family, but having that sense of pride. And I think having that sense of pride in yourself is something that everyone in America could use right now. Especially as we see jobless numbers continue to increase, we're seeing that it's very necessary for us to feel pride in and of ourselves, as other sources of pride maybe are taken away from us during the COVID pandemic. So why is it necessary, especially even back at the beginning of World War I, when things seemed a little more agrarian and rural, for us to have a food growing campaign funded by the War Department? So this was a period of transition in America. We had this fundamental identity to agriculture and production that was being diminished as people were moving to the cities. So we knew this, the Industrial Revolution, right? We're seeing more people live in cities, more people living closer to manufacturing centers to have reliable jobs. And this was a fundamental shift. This is absolutely very, very important in our history. And it's one that we do not talk about very often, that this is when Americans went from being producers to consumers. And what we see today is we are not only just consumers, we are one step further. We are dependent consumers. So we depend on consuming for everyday needs in our lives because we're not producing our own goods. And traditionally, we have the ability to produce things, especially things like food. Our meals today, they travel about 1,500 miles from the farm to get to your plate. That is half the length of the country. So why do we have this system set up? And this is all coming back to consumerism. Consumers want to buy food year round. They want to buy more processed, ready to eat food. They want to pay as little as possible to eat these foods. And food transit, it's primarily done by road and rail. This is because this is the infrastructure we have had in place for decades. It's also one of the cheapest fuel sources to get food around. So we have seen a huge transition from decentralized agricultural production to centralized systems of supermarkets that have taken over these local and regional markets. And when we keep talking about the theory of capitalism in our consumeristic lifestyles, these cheap labor costs mean that food, it can actually be grown in one place, sent away and processed before returning to be sold from where it came from. So it's one of those things where not only is food not localized, but the work around agriculture is no longer localized either. And this is complicated because at the beginning of our society in America, Thomas Jefferson envisioned a very, very different community, one of agrarian democracy. So he understood the troubles based on what he saw in the earlier Industrial Revolution in England, that manufacturing distorted relationships, it bred dependence on consumerism and resources and jobs, and it spawned greed and corruption. So when he thought about what was best for our nation, he definitely thought about a nation of farmers that would be free and self-sufficient. Even women would be landowners. Even back when Thomas Jefferson was around, thinking about women owning land, small self-sufficient community farms. And this type of society would preserve the qualities in which the strength of a republic depends on. So when we see an example of what type of person is this, the Yeoman farmer is traditionally the very key example in what he thought American society would look like. Non-slave holding, small landowning family farmers. They had the embodiment of American ideals. They were honest, virtuous, hardworking, and independent. And it's really important to go highlight the fact that they were non-slave owning. This is because Jefferson saw slave owning as a form of dependence, not as independence. So if a Yeoman farmer could not produce and do the work himself and depended on another person to do it, then that was not something that he believed in. So even though we have this idea about a far more, I want to say kinder farmer in America, this still clashed with Native American culture. When settlers were settling America and started putting up private fences for their own land, Native Americans didn't even understand the concept or the paradigm of private ownership. So the fact that even though the Yaman farmer would still be a good step in a better direction, it still clashed with Native American culture and ideals and paradigms systematically. Owning land was not something that really was at all part of their culture, and just something important to consider. So it's odd because Americans, I think, have this love affair with identifying as pull yourself up by the bootstraps, independent producers of everything we need. And we have a really hard time wrestling the reality of our history, that Americans really imported vulnerable and disenfranchised populations to actually grow our food. And this was way back in the beginning. Indentured servants from England were the first form of people who were basically utilized to grow food so that they could get free passage to America. Obviously, we saw in the 1650s to 1800s, African people stolen and enslaved. And so then it continued even after 1848, after the Mexican-American War. Land-owning Mexican citizens or immigrants were transitioned to working on other farms as Americans grabbed their lands and racism displaced them. Even throughout the 1930s, as African Americans moved towards manufacturing, 7 out of 8 farmers were Chinese. They were poor Chinese immigrants. And today we still have the immigrant culture to grow our food. The H-2A guest visas provide about 3 million people to come over and work in our agricultural workforce in the US. And while it's important to recognize that we do want to give people the ability to have employment and to have jobs and to stimulate the economy, what do jobs look like when they can't be replaced by technology or outsourced to other places, or outsource the work to come in and do the work for us? So how can we create more of a sustainable economy, more sustainable jobs for American people and for people throughout the entire world too? So more solutions. I promise we can focus on solutions and solve a lot of these problems. If we were able to bring back large-scale agriculture education and training, I think we can solve a lot of our problems. Education is the great equalizer, and everyone benefits from education. One example of this is the Veterans to Farmers program in Colorado, USA, and their mission is to train veterans in agricultural systems, technologies, and business operations for a fulfilling and sustainable lifestyle. One of the testimonials from a graduate, a veteran, American veteran, is the amazing farming education aside. Veterans to Farmers offers that camaraderie that many of us are lacking after getting out of the service. Through Veterans to Farmers, lasting bonds form and we find the community we've been seeking. So it's definitely one of these things where sustainability education goes beyond just providing jobs to people, but provides more of a culture for them. Another great example is Sankofa Farms here in North Carolina. So this is a wonderful example. This farm provides educational opportunities for youth in Durham, North Carolina, especially lower income targeted audiences. This helps to improve their perception of STEM and agriculturally related professions, increase the dollars earned, improve career readiness skills, and improve school performance for our attendees. So actually the director is in the blue sweatshirt right there. And so he is a TED Talk award winner. He has so many business allocates. He is a phenomenal mentor for these students. And what's really important when we talk about young African Americans seeing a strong Black man as a farmer, as a business entrepreneur, it's really important that they see someone who looks like them in this position. A lot of times in sustainability education, it is inundated with women who look just like me, or men who are white and have the time to advocate on sustainability issues. So when we talk about inclusivity, equity, when we have underrepresented minority communities, African American culture in places of leadership, then we have younger generations who see themselves in places of leadership. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that can come out of sustainability education and large-scale agriculture education and training. Economic stimulation is one of my favorite conversations to have. Alternative localized economic theories are absolutely beautiful to me. So one example of this is Aaron Daniels. He's actually from Newark, New Jersey. where a large percentage of his high school graduating class did not even graduate with him. So for him to be able to graduate from high school in this community, and not only that, but start a local honeybee keeping company, and make a successful business out of it, is another incredible example of entrepreneurship, localized production, a sense of pride for people that they're able to mimic. And we know that when small farms are run by people who care deeply about their community, about the health of the natural world, and about their peer producers, we're reflecting back to Jefferson's morals and ideals about the preservation of whatever public needs to function. We're always going back to pride and self-sufficiency and community through these solutions, which I think is really beautiful. So this is really great too. Just let the numbers talk. When we talk about sustainability, I very much try to not talk about the environment. A big part of sustainability education is actually framing. So being able to frame your argument to the audience that you have. So a lot of people just flat out do not care about the environment, and that's absolutely fine, because you can care about the economy and then thus it cares about the environment. Again, sustainability is that intersection between economy, community, and environment. It's not just about the environment. A 2016 study out of UC Davis shows that if you put $1 million of revenue into a farmer's market, you're going to create almost 32 local jobs. Whereas if you were going to participate in the industrial agriculture system with that $1 million, you're only creating about 10.5 jobs. So when you think about farming, don't think about the environment, think about people, think about jobs. Localized, sustainable agriculture cannot be replaced by technology, and it cannot be outsourced to other countries. So you're creating permanent localized jobs for people who need them. And I'm pretty sure people always need to eat, so it's not a job that's going to experience the risk of a boom and bust economy, right? So agriculture is consistent. And if we can create dependency and consistency and jobs in that field, we're going to see a lot less of this pushback when we experience disturbances like COVID, or if we experience other disturbances like natural disasters or a lack of access to a certain resource. So building resiliency in our economy means localizing our production of resources and goods. So this is just a great example. If you are ever feeling down or uninspired, you have to go on Instagram. Instagram is one of the most incredible places. Go to the search bar and search "Grow Food, Not Lawns." Jason did a great job naming this conference, and I think it really shows in the community that's ready to put our hands in the dirt and get ready to fight for the sustainability of our communities. So definitely remember that you can grow the food you need on the land that you have. If you notice an abandoned lot, talk to your municipality, see if they're doing anything with that lot. People are able to grow food, and this food directly for Urban Farmstead goes to a restaurant and a farm stand. So he's able to create a localized market for a need for people who want to consume a resource all the time. So he's not going to experience boom or bust because people always need to eat. And this one I love because this is actually a front yard garden. So no matter where the lawn is, that's where the garden can go. So it's really great to see cars and a street right outside where a garden is being grown, so that people can visually see, oh, people are participating in this, and maybe it's something that I can participate into. Rooftops are wonderful. They're very underutilized. A lot of them cannot be outfitted for solar due to technology issues or connections to the grid. So if you can't do solar, why not do farming? It's another form of photosynthesizing, which is really great. And Brooklyn Grange in Brooklyn, New York is one of the most beautiful places you can go in an urban setting and see what a farm looks like. So just being able to see the utilization, we call this utilization of latent resources. So a latent resource is something that exists already, but is not being utilized to its full potential. I think rooftops are a wonderful example of a latent resource and something that we can utilize to help solve a lot of our problems. So just remember, I hope you guys can smile like the little smile on this carrot that came from my garden. But people power is the most sustainable source of power on the planet. And utilizing this power is one of the best ways to create a thriving, livable, and loving society. So I hope that you feel a little bit inspired and you understand the systematic paradigms that are functioning and why we're kind of in the situation we're in now, but also can see the steps forward into how we can solve the problems that we're experiencing now too.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. I think that really does speak to exactly what we're trying to do here on the Grow Food Not Grass Summit. And that is to show people that, yeah, not only can you do this and to show them how, but to show them why it's so important. It's not just COVID-19 and kind of the pain that people are going through now, but it's every day. It was before this, it's after this, and this is really how we can help change the world for the better.
Yeah. I think it was Einstein who said that the formulation of the problem is almost as important as the formulation of the solution, because you're not going to be able to find a solution if you don't understand why you even have a problem.
That is incredibly true. All right, well, thank you so much for your time and for this presentation, and keep spreading the good news, and I hope tons of people who watch this are going to turn around and take all the information coming and go and build a whole bunch of gardens. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jason.